Tonight's topic, it's originally we had to kind of pivot on this one a little bit in lieu of some things that happened this week. And so I shared on the app this week about something that we lost one of our brothers this week. And so it's a pretty heavy thing that led to this, and how I feel led to share what we're going to talk about tonight. And I want to remember Blair for his service to the church. If you saw him every Sunday at the connection tent, you saw him driving the golf carts, you saw him at the after services cleaning up and picking up and the tear down and stuff like that. Blair was selfless in his serving. He was here every Sunday. He was here almost every Thursday as well. And so his contributions to the church, to the tribe, was not in vain, right? And so we thank him for that. But the moment of despair for Blair, and my heart bleeds for him, in that when a man decides to take his own life, it just sends a message to all of us loud and clear. And that it just really demonstrates the importance of community and tribe and fellowship. And that's something so near and dear to my heart. And I'm so thankful that we have this group and we have this tribe and these men who show up for themselves, but more importantly, you show up for each other and you show up for the Lord. And I'm so thankful that we have men that do that so selflessly and so honorably week in and week out like that. So before we start our topic tonight, I want to take a moment and remember Blair with a moment of silence. So if you bow your heads and just take a moment. And so as we get into the topic tonight, we're going to talk about what a lot of times happens that leads up to something like this, to where a man feels like his best option is to end his life. And so, and the two, we talk about this every week between the Christian man and the man of God. This is our staple in Brothers of Courage. And so the Christian man kind of lets his identity be of the world. But the man of God lets his identity be rooted in Jesus. And so that's one of the biggest differentiations between the two. Again, the compromise and settling of the Christian man versus the abstinence and excellence of the man of God. And so tonight, we're going to talk about loneliness and hopelessness. So as we talk about loneliness and hopelessness, these are typically two of the things that lead to a man thinking that, there's no better option than to end my life. And so, and as I talk about this topic tonight, there may be a man in this room that has felt like that, that the world's a better place without you, that your best option is to remove yourself from the situation entirely and end your life. There may be even men in this room who have attempted to take their own life. And so as I talk about this tonight, I'm not asking for hands to go up or any acknowledgement of that. But if you've been there, there's a reason you're still here today. And I'm thankful for that reason, that you're in this room tonight with your brothers. There'll be a time to share our stories and testimonies here when we break out into groups tonight. But again, I'm not asking for acknowledgement in the big group setting as far as if you've thought about that, if you've attempted that. But just know you're not alone in that. You're not alone, period, but you're not alone in that thinking. That men have gotten to that point. So when we talk about loneliness, there's a difference between feeling lonely and being alone, right? So you can be in a crowded room. You can be in this room right now and you can feel lonely. You can feel like you're alone in this very room tonight. You can be in the AT&T Center in a packed stadium and feel like you're alone. You can be in a world of 7 billion people and feel like you're alone. But the fact of the matter is, you're feeling lonely because you are not alone. The fact of the matter is, even if you are by yourself, you've got the Holy Spirit with you at all times. And so I want you to acknowledge that and recognize that and lean into that, not just tonight, but forever. And knowing that the Holy Spirit is with you at all times, so you're never actually alone. There may be a lot of times where you feel lonely. Some of you guys, some of you single guys, for example, you may feel lonely at times if you live by yourself. There also may be men that live in a full house. You have a wife and kids in your very house, but you still feel alone. Right? So feeling lonely is not the same thing as being alone. And so I want us to recognize the fact that we're never alone and that lonely is a feeling, it's not a state, right? And so right now in this room, you've got brothers who would gladly keep you company. There's I don't know, probably 30 guys in here tonight, and so I'm sure that somebody in here would gladly keep you company. If you said, "Hey, man, I'm feeling lonely tonight. I'm not feeling like myself," you got a few minutes to talk, right? Just this week, I've had several guys reach out to me. Hey, man, can we talk? And it's been such a blessing to have brothers reach out to me and me be able to reach out to brothers, knowing that I'm not alone, but they're not alone as well, and support one another through things like the loss of a brother. And so, the feeling lonely versus lonely, they're mostly a result of two things, and these two things are not of the Lord, right? The first thing is pride, and the second thing is fear. And so when we talk about the pride thing, it's we're not supposed to be boastful and proud, as men anyway. But the feeling of pride is that we think we're supposed to have the answer, right? So we're supposed to have it all figured out. That you're less of a man if you don't have all the answers. You're less of a man if you haven't figured it out. And so when we think that the world around us is crumbling and we haven't gotten answers, we don't have answers for the people around us, we don't have answers for ourselves, we think that sometimes that loneliness, that leads to loneliness and isolation, thinking that I'm the only one that feels this way. I'm the only one that is this messed up. I'm the only one that's this far gone. And a lot of times also, we take pride, becoming prideful, and end up to the point where we take our lives because it's our problem. I'm not going to burden anybody else with my problem. This is my problem to solve, and I can't fix it, so I'm going to take matters in my own hands. And now what you're really doing is you're ending the problem for you, but you're passing that problem on to somebody else. It doesn't fix the problem. It ends the problem for you, but it passes the problem, and it becomes more problematic for other people. It creates more problems, creates more questions than answers. And so to a degree, I'm not one to hold punches when I talk about this stuff, because we need to be unfiltered with each other about some of this stuff. It's kind of selfish, right? So it's taking matters in your hands and being selfish about it and passing your problems again onto somebody else that doesn't deserve it. It's your family, it's your coworkers, whoever it may be, that are bearing the brunt of your problems going forward out. Again, it didn't fix the problem, right? So, and also this problem is you've created a permanent solution to a temporary problem. None of life problems are permanent, right? The only thing that's permanent in life for us is the physical death of our bodies, right? And so, but I said there's hope, and the hope is in Jesus Christ, and Jesus overcame death, right? And so if he can overcome death, that same spirit that lived in him lives in us. So we have the strength of the resurrection from Jesus Christ. And so nothing in life is permanent. And so no problem is permanent. And so you can overcome any of these problems that life throws at you, no matter how big or small. Even some problems are going to take longer than others. Some might be it might fix overnight. Somebody might fix the problem for you. And sometimes it takes years to overcome that and fix that problem, right? But the fact of the matter is, it's not permanent, right? Now, the fear part that we think about this is that fear is from, again, not having the answers. When you don't have the answers, why do we put so much pressure on ourselves to have the answers as men? Right? Why do we put so much pressure on ourselves to know how to fix everything? One, we're fixers, right? But when you blame yourself for not having all the answers, not being able to fix the problem, what you're really saying is you don't trust God. You don't trust God that he has all the answers, right? So God knows everything. God created the beginning from the end. He knows everything that's going to happen in between. So you're not trusting God to give you those answers in the time. Maybe you're impatient. Maybe you fear you're running out of time. But the bottom line is you're not trusting God to resolve that problem for you. And I pray that we can lean into God for that, for those answers in his perfect timing, right? So sometimes we want to rush that timeline and fix it now. Another fear is that that you're not enough, right? You fear that you're not enough. You fear you're insufficient. Men feel this all the time. And again, not by a show of hands, but there are men in this room that have felt like they're not enough, whether it's as a father, as a husband, as a leader in the workplace, any of that stuff like that. And so there's definitely been a time almost in every single man's life where they felt like they're not enough. But the bottom line is that you are enough, right? And so, but we live in a world that conditions us to believe those lies sometimes that we're not enough. When we start comparing ourselves to others, you compare yourself to another man. If you compare yourself to a man that's more successful, whatever successful is completely relative. It's not measured in money. It's not measured in health. It's not measured in your career. Success is relative to every single person, but how we glorify God is ultimately the most successful thing that we can be measured in, right? And so when you feel that you aren't enough, you sometimes think that the world is better off without you. The world won't miss me when I'm gone. Who cares, right? So you fear that you're insufficient. But do you know that Jesus died on the cross for you? We talked about this 2 weeks ago in here on Sunday, about Resurrection Sunday. Jesus died for you. What's that communicate to you about your value and your worth? That you are enough, that another man was willing to die for you. So you are enough. Don't ever feel like you're not. Another thing about this fear part is that we lack a true identity. I talk about identity the very first meeting of the season at Brothers of Courage, because when we lack an identity, we are influenced by what the world says and by what the world tells us and by what the world does with us, right? So when we put our worth in people, things, companies that will fire us, turn their back on us, hurt us, betray us, all those things, your worth will be minimized by whoever that you put your worth in, right? And so when you put your identity in something that can be taken away from you, your worth is, again, scrap. You've got nothing. You're starting from scratch again every single time. So that's the mistake we make when we're identity-based with the world, rather than identity-based about what the Word says about us and how Jesus died for us. So don't let the world influence your worth. And then hopelessness. I feel like there's no way out of this. There's no light at the end of this tunnel. This is the darkest season I've ever been in. A lot of you, I think every person in here, well, inevitably every person in here has had the darkest moment of their life, the darkest season of their life. Sometimes that's a day, sometimes that's a week, sometimes it's a month, sometimes it's years. But your darkest season, we can all remember that. We've all been there. We all know exactly how we felt during that season. It's not fun, but every man in here got through it. You got through that dark season. You're here, right? And so those dark seasons don't last forever. And so when you feel hopeless, know that you always have a hope, and his name is Jesus. He overcame death and the world. And so when we think about that, no matter your circumstances, you think about the stories in the Bible where when the armies were outnumbered, or and when we needed the sun to stand still, and those kind of things. All these things that, like, with logic made no sense, but by faith they were able to happen. So the three teenagers got thrown into the fiery pit. The Daniels got fed to the lions. All these things didn't make any sense, but it took so much faith that they were overcome those things, come through those things, unscathed, like those. So fear is based in hopelessness. Now, I've got a reading here. Can I get a volunteer to read 1 John chapter 4, verse 18? Stephen, go ahead. So it's 1 John chapter 4, verse 18. And I'm going to get, I've got 8 other verses for us to talk about tonight as well. I'm going to get some volunteers for that in a bit. But Stephen, if you got 1 John chapter 4, verse 18. And if you've got your Bible, you can turn to this. But this is about fear, right? And so when you think about fear, again, pride and fear often lead us to feeling lonely and hopeless. So Stephen, go ahead. What's that say?
There is no fear in love. The perfect love drives out
fear. Perfect love drives out all fear, right? So when I heard once that an atheist was quoted as saying, if Christians really believe everything in the Bible, they would be the most fearless people in the world. Because we're told, do not fear 365 times in the Bible. And it's no coincidence, 365 days in the year. So if we truly believed everything that we read in the Bible, everything that the Bible says, we would be truly fearless. Because God gives us all the courage, all the hope, and all the wisdom in that book. But yet, human logic, the world, influence us to think differently. So, again, we're not talking about never having doubt, never second guessing, or never having a bit of fear. But we think about the opposite. This group is called Brothers of Courage, right? And so the opposite of fear is courage, right? So, and I was talking, with Willie about this yesterday. That courage, we think men. What do we think of when we think courage as men, as a strong man? What do we think courage? What's some of the things we think about? Military guys going in the face of battle like that. Absolutely, that's one example. What else? Somebody strong, physical strength, right? I think about facing fighting a bear, right? That's courage right there. If you got to fight a bear, you got to fight a lion, something like that, right? What else are there examples of we think of as men? What we think courage is? Not afraid of anything, right? So does courage mean we don't have fear? No, courage means we just override that fear, right? So courage means we stand in the face of fear and we confront that and we go and we march through that, right? So these things that when I'm talking about, and the loneliness and hopelessness, it's not to say that we don't ever face these things, but we've got tools, we've got weapons, we've got brothers to get through these kind of things, right? And so I want you to know that, again, you're never alone. And when I think about this, like what I love about groups is the power of me too. And you think about me too, right? So when somebody says something that they're ashamed of, that they're fearful of, that they're embarrassed about, I guarantee you, if you said that out loud to the group, you can look to your right and to your left. There's a man in here that can say me too, right? So, if there's a man that admits a fear in here, say he's scared of clowns, right? Probably somebody else in here is scared of clowns. A man that's addicted to X, Y, and Z, probably somebody else that's been here that's been through that, right? So if there's a man in here that feels guilt or shame about something that happened in their past, guarantee there's somebody else in the group that says me too. Now, this also applies to a man that has the courage to say, I'm lonely. I don't feel like I'm enough. I'm scared. And I guarantee there's a man in this room that can say me too. And I guarantee that man's not going to look at you and make fun of you. There aren't men that are going to judge you for it. They're going to applaud you, and they're going to back you up, and they're going to encourage you. Because that's what we do in this group. That's what we do in this tribe. So we're brothers of courage, but we also encourage one another. We also lift each other up. We hold each other accountable to the Word of God. And so as we talk about these things, don't think for a second that anything you're going through that you're alone in. Whether you've got every person's phone number in this room, it doesn't matter. Whether you're on the app, cool, that's great too. But I guarantee you've got somebody to reach out to. If it's not in your own household, your wife and kids, if it's not in your workplace, it's not in your family, I guarantee it's in here. There's somebody in here that's willing to pick up that phone when you call, right? And so if somebody's going to check on you and say, hey, how you doing? It's okay to be honest and say, hey, man, I'm struggling. I'm really wrestling with this. This is really weighing heavy on me right now. So don't ever think you're alone. Don't ever think you have to go through something alone. And don't ever think another man's going to judge you for seeking help, right? Whether it's like with help with a project, like I'll be the first to admit, I don't know how to grill. There are plenty of barbecue masters in here. I would be glad to say, hey, man, I don't know what I'm doing on this thing. Teach me how to do this, right? And I know Miguel and then several other guys would love to teach me how to barbecue, how to cook a brisket, right? And so I'm thankful for that. There are guys in here that say, hey, man, I don't know the first thing about working out, help me out. I would be glad to share with you how to start working out and how to reach your health and fitness goals. So everybody in here has a value to another person. So you are valued. You are valuable. And every person in here can benefit from another man in this room. Nobody in here knows everything, but collectively, we know a whole lot, right? And so that's where I want to illustrate the point of brotherhood, meaning that we're not judging each other. We're here to lift each other up, not put each other down. There's nothing in here that is too shameful to admit, too shameful to talk about. Nothing that's going to be embarrassing that we're going to spread gossip around the church about you, because what happens in here stays in here. And we're here to lift each other up and build each other up as men, right? So I want to encourage you to do that. And so now we're getting into a couple Bible verses here about the difference between loneliness and rejection. And I really want to emphasize the difference between being rejected and redirected. So one of the things, and I'll talk specifically about our brother Blair, is that rejection weighed heavy on him. And I know this because I had several conversations about him, with him about being rejected specifically by women, right? So for Blair, those of you who don't know, he was probably in his late 40s. He had never been married. He had no kids, but he wanted to be married. He wanted a partner. And there's a lot of men in here that want a partner as well. But the constant rejection that he got from women really weighed heavily on him. And I can relate. I get rejected by women, and it weighs heavy on me too. And I want a partner just like he did. However, that rejection is sometimes a redirection to something else, right? So, and that's just using in that context of relationships. Some of you may have been fired from a job or got laid off from a job, or your business closed down. You got rejected from that job. You had to find another alternative. You had to go somewhere else. Some of you have been rejected by other churches where they didn't accept you for who you are. You couldn't be yourself at that church, and you're here now. So think about the times that you've been rejected, and think about how that wasn't necessarily God rejecting you. It was just God redirecting you to something bigger, something better, something more aligned with your purpose and your destiny and what He has for you. So don't take rejection as something personal, whether it's from a romantic partner, a business, or a church even like that. So don't take it personal, because that's God protecting you. You may have heard before that God's rejection is God's protection. So that's Him looking out for you and not letting you settle for something what you thought was best for you. So sometimes we're willing to settle for something when God says, no, I've got something better for you. You've seen the illustration where he got that huge teddy bear behind his back, and got that little girl with the raggedy teddy bear in front of her like that, and she doesn't want to give up that raggedy old bear. But what He's got is so much bigger and better than anything she wants to let go of. Right? So once we let go of that God's going to, bam, put something in our hands so much better than anything we can ask, think, or imagine. And so we have to learn to deal with rejection gracefully, knowing that it is in God's will to to be rejected at that moment. And sometimes his denials are sometimes just delays, right? It's just a not right now thing. It doesn't mean it's a permanent rejection. It doesn't mean you're never going to have that. It's just not right now. And so take that into consideration too. When you don't get what you want in life, think about one, submitting to God's will. But secondly, it's either for your protection or it's a delay, and you're going to have that something similar or something better later. Okay. So now, again, I got some verses up here I want to talk about with some loneliness. So I need 8 volunteers tonight. So can I get, who's going to be the first volunteer tonight? Clint, you take Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 8. Robert, can you get Psalms chapter 25, verse 16? Who else? Ed, brother of the week, take Matthew 28, verse 20. Daniel, Isaiah 43, verse 2. I'll get the other 4 in a second. But these are as it relates to loneliness. Deuteronomy 31, verse 8. Clint?
The Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid, do not be discouraged.
He will never leave you. He will never forsake you. Now, this is in reference when they're talking about they're going to battle. And so whenever you're going into battle, knowing you're never going in alone. Whatever that battle is, whether it's a battle for your health, a battle for your job, a battle for your family, a battle to be free from addiction, the Lord is with you. He will not forsake you. He is with you in all those times like that. So remember, you're not alone in any of these battles. And also, you got plenty of brothers to back you up and support you throughout that battle as well. Psalms 25, verse 16. Robert, you got that?
Look upon me, have pity on me, for I am alone and afflicted.
So this is a reading from Psalms where David was feeling alone. He said, look at me, pity me, I'm alone. And he's crying out to God in this, right? So physically he was alone. But you know what he did? He cried out to God. He didn't try to figure it out himself. He didn't try to do it on his own. He didn't lean on his own understanding. He cried out to God and depended on God to get him through that loneliness that he felt right there. All right, now we've got Matthew 28, 20.
Teach these new disciples to obey all the commands I have given you. Be sure of this, I am with you always,
I am with you always, even to the end of ages. Right? So even to your last breath, he is with you. So the end of ages is far after your last breath. So know that God is with you always. There's not a moment where he's not with you. He's with you now until the end of ages. All right, and then we've got Isaiah 43, verse 2. Discussion questions for tonight. There's 2 of them. The first one has a second part. Number 1, have you ever felt hopeless? Have you ever felt hopeless, and what gave you hope to get out of it? Right? Have you ever felt hopeless, and what got you out of that? What gave you hope? And the second question is, it's the heavy one right here, and this is where I encourage men to be courageous with this and speak from your heart. Have you ever had thoughts of taking your own life, and what changed your mind? Because obviously you didn't do that, right? So if you've thought about it or if you've attempted it, if you're willing to share that information with your brothers tonight, what talked you out of it? What changed your mind? Okay. So break into your groups, talk about that. We'll regather about 8:20. We'll go ahead and break in now. John chapter 15, verse 18. 2 more. Luther, can you get Psalms 118, verse 22? And 1 more. Gilbert, can you get Romans 8:28? So starting with Psalms 34:18.
The Lord is close to the brokenhearted, saves those who are crushed.
The Lord is close to the brokenhearted. So rejection, oftentimes we're brokenhearted about that rejection. Again, whether from a romantic partner, from a job, from a church, it hurts. You're rejected. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted. John 15:18. Is that you, Ramon?
The world hates you, though they hated me before Jesus.
Think about that. It's Jesus saying, if the world hates you, think about this. The world hated me long before they hated you. So think about the perfect one in Jesus and how much he was hated. So it's almost like, hey, I got something else in common with Jesus, right? So it's flattering. It's a blessing. But the world hated you? Well, cool. The world hated Jesus too. And look, he did all right. Next we got Psalms 118, chapter 22. I think that's you, Luther. So the one that they rejected became the cornerstone. So think about that. So just because they rejected Jesus doesn't mean his life was over. Doesn't mean he didn't fulfill his purpose. The one they rejected became the cornerstone of our faith. So here we are 2,000 years later. We're still honoring Jesus, still loving Jesus, and still talking about him and praising his name. So just because they reject you doesn't mean your life is over. Doesn't mean your purpose is ended. It means there's still a lot ahead of you. So don't give up once you've been rejected. And lastly, Romans 8:28.
We know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose.
He works all things together for our good, for those that love him and call upon him, right? And so think about that. He works all things together. So when you get rejected, again, rejected versus redirected, rejected and protected, right? So when all things work together, so when something doesn't work out in the way you thought it was, that's okay. It's not the end. So there's still more to come. That just means there's another piece to your puzzle coming up. So we don't have to have it all figured out. We don't have to pretend like we've got it all figured out, because we know the one who has figured it out. God doesn't just see the plan, he created it. And so when we think about when things don't fall into place like we want it to in our timing, wait on his timing. Wait on the Lord, and all things will come together for our good. All right, so now we're getting ready to break out in our groups here, but I want you to think about this, is that don't ever give up on God, because he will never give up on you. Right? And so he leaves the 99 for the one, right? So don't give up on God just because things aren't going your way or life didn't turn out the way you wanted it to. If you've reached a certain age and haven't achieved certain things, or your health is going in a certain way, go ahead, Rudy.
If you don't mind me sharing, loneliness and hopelessness.
Yeah.
A lot of it has to do with being men. Is we decrease our estrogen as we get older. Once you start hitting 40, and if you're low in estrogen, you're gonna get suicidal thoughts. You're gonna get stuff like that. It's not something that you have control of, because you have a chemical imbalance.
Yep.
Best thing you can do is seek a doctor, check your balances,
Yep.
check your blood work,
Yep.
take vitamins, exercise,
Yes.
and eat right.
Absolutely.
All that's gonna go back to loneliness and
Yes. And by default, those things that you're talking about, diet, exercise, you take care of your health.
yes.
That's not selfish at all. That is for the betterment of yourself, but also for the betterment of everybody around you.
That's right.
Everybody around you, like I said last week, everybody around you benefits from you being in better health, spiritually and physically, right?
Recently, I went to go see a doctor because I love to check my blood work. I have insurance, so it's free. And she told me, "Are you having any suicidal thoughts?" I said, "No, ma'am." I said, "I feel damn good." And she goes, "Your level of estrogen is so low, you should have already thrown yourself out."
Really?
That's exactly what she told me.
Wow.
And so she gave me an estrogen pill. And so my point is, I handle it differently. If somebody doesn't handle it the way I do, you would be out that window.
Right. So, and that's a good sign to get your levels, get your blood work done, get your levels checked. So, I mean, and how many men knew that? Not me, right? So, thank you for sharing that. So, when we think about this, guys, it's just not giving up. So don't ever lose hope. Think about, Easter was just a couple weekends ago, and I think about how the followers of Jesus, when they saw him hung on a cross, in history up to that point, every person that had been crucified, they bring the cross down, they bury the person, and that's the end of the story, right? And so think about how much hope was lost on that Friday, even in the darkness that overcame, right? And so think about how dark that was in their lives, that season in their lives, that moment in their lives, when the one they believed to be the Messiah was hung on a cross and died. And so how much hope was lost then? How hopeless were they? How lonely did they feel now that the one that they looked up to is now dead? But look what happened later, right? So that they lost hope. They lost hope. Humans lost hope. But God knew the plan all along. He knew that days later that Jesus would come out of that tomb. He was going to roll that stone away, and he was going to come back to life and be resurrected. And so now think about how much they went from down here with their hope and how that skyrocketed up once they saw Jesus again, right? And so that's what your hope can do when you realize that Jesus is that hope, right? So whatever you're going through, you may be at that pit right now. You may be at the bottom right now. However, know that Jesus has overcome death, and he's at the top of the mountain. He's at that mountaintop for you right there, and you can be too. So giving your life to Jesus is the best thing you can do, but don't ever lose hope, because he never gives up on you. Okay? Discussion questions for tonight. There's two of them. The first one has a second part. Number one, have you ever felt hopeless? Have you ever felt hopeless, and what gave you hope to get out of it? Right? Have you ever felt hopeless, and what got you out of that? What gave you hope? And the second question is, it's the heavy one right here, and this is where I encourage men to be courageous with this and speak from your heart. Have you ever had thoughts of taking your own life, and what changed your mind? Because obviously you didn't do that, right? So if you've thought about it or if you've attempted it, if you're willing to share that information with your brothers tonight, what talked you out of it? What changed your mind? Okay, so break into your groups, talk about that. We'll regather about 8:20. We'll go ahead and break in now.